wants to be free. I bet he wouldn't fancy me. That's too bad.
I've done some moonlighting, but nothing fancy like this.
Loved it, but why spend all this money on this fancy dinner?
He's staying at that fancy casino hotel across the street, okay?
Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're tackling a word that can be a real puzzle for English learners. It's a word you hear all the time, but it seems to change its meaning depending on where you find it.
I mean, have you ever noticed this? One moment, someone's talking about a fancy restaurant, and the next, they're saying they fancy a cup of tea. And then, out of nowhere, you hear fancy that. So, what's going on?
But hey, don't worry about it. We're going to solve this puzzle together. In just the next few minutes, you're going to have a crystal clear understanding of this word, and you'll know exactly how to use it.
Okay, let's jump right in. The first piece of the puzzle, and probably the way you hear fancy used most often, is as an adjective, a describing word.
So, when fancy is an adjective, it's basically a way to say something is, well, a bit extra. It's the opposite of plain or simple. It's got that little bit of flair. For example, if you say, let's go to a fancy restaurant, you're not talking about your local coffee shop, right? You're picturing tablecloths, nice silverware, and definitely not fast food.
Same goes for clothes. A fancy dress isn't just a regular dress. It's the one you wear to a wedding or a big party. It's special. It's elaborate. It's got that wow factor.
All right, got the adjective down? Good. Now let's move on to part 2, where fancy becomes a verb, an action word. And this is where things get really interesting, because it splits into 2 totally different meanings.
So check this out. On the one hand, it can mean you simply want or like something. But on the other hand, it can mean you imagine or believe something, which is a whole different ballgame. Let's break down both.
Okay, first up, the wanting version. This is super common, especially in British English. If someone says, I fancy a cup of tea, they're just saying, I'd like a cup of tea. It's casual and friendly. You might hear, do you fancy going to the cinema? Same idea. Now for the other side of the coin, if you say, he fancies himself a great singer, you're saying he thinks he's a great singer, even if he really isn't. It's about having an idea about yourself that might not quite match reality. Okay, we've covered the big ones, adjective and verb. But stick with me because there are a couple more pieces to this puzzle. They're not as common, but they're definitely good to have in your back pocket. So you can also use fancy as a noun, and when you do, it's basically talking about a whim, a sudden, not-so-serious feeling of liking something.
You'll often hear the phrase, to take a fancy to something. So if he took a fancy to the little boat, it means he suddenly liked it. It's probably not a deep, lifelong passion for sailing. It's just a fleeting interest that might pass.
And then there's this great little phrase, fancy that. It's just a fun way to show you're surprised. Someone tells you some unexpected news and you just go, fancy that. It's like saying, wow, really? Or imagine that.
All right, so let's put it all together. We've looked at all the different pieces of the fancy puzzle. Now let's see the whole picture so it really sticks.
Okay, here's our cheat sheet. As an adjective, it means elegant or special. Think a fancy car. As a verb, it's got 2 jobs. Wanting something, like I fancy a walk, or believing something about yourself, like she fancies herself an expert. As a noun, it's a quick liking, a passing fancy. And of course, that little exclamation of surprise, fancy that.
So what's the big takeaway here? It is all about context. The words around the word fancy are your clues. Just ask yourself, is it describing something? Is it an action? Is it a feeling? That's how you'll know exactly which fancy you're dealing with. It's the secret key, really.
And just like that, the puzzle is solved. Fancy isn't so tricky after all, is it? You've totally got this. So the only question I have for you is, what do you fancy learning about next? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.